I sincerely do not think that you are capable to fathom the real power of what is on this whiteboard. What is on this whiteboard behind me, which again, I do not recommend you to start reading until we get into it slowly but surely. And again, I rarely give credits or thanks to one thing in particular. But if I had to talk about what changed my demeanor, what got me from 10, 20, 30K a month to being capable of knocking out months where I make 6 figures in profit, I believe that this is it. This is it over here. This is what allowed me to turn, and the understanding of what's behind me, most importantly, is what allowed me to turn into who I am today. And most importantly, we changed the lives of over 350 individuals and counting. I believe that 90% of these guys' success, we need to allocate it as well, a big part of it, to what is over here. So of course, without further ado, ladies and gents, just because I'm not a fan of massive introductions that are just going to essentially suck the soul out of you, let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to something which is even more important than your own studies of the subconscious mind. I'm here to talk about the reticular activating system. As some of you have already heard, and as most of you already know, we become more than who we are. And who we are is mostly surrounded by our belief system. Therefore, in short, we become more than what we believe in. Ladies and gents, I'd like to introduce you to the reticular activating system, or the RAS. The reticular activating system is something that you should be looking into much more than your own subconscious mind, even though the RAS, the reticular activating system, is actually stored within the subconscious mind. Now, why is the RAS something that we must master, we must understand, and we must even put on a leash? The RAS has as one of its duties to look into your current stack of belief systems and to emphasize them as high as possible. It is important to understand that as your RAS goes into your subconscious mind and observes some of your beliefs, it's important that you understand that the RAS, what it does is it takes those belief systems and it emphasizes them. You may ask, how? How does the RAS looks into our database of belief systems in our subconscious mind and emphasizes those belief systems? The way that the RAS will emphasize those beliefs is by drawing my attention towards certain things that will prove me right. For example, I believe one day that I'm ugly. I go outside and I have a guy that stares a little bit too long at my beard, for example. What my RAS will immediately make me say in my mind is, oh, why is this dude looking at me? Why is he looking at my beard? Is it because I'm ugly? Is it because oh, maybe my beard is not well done enough? And then I get going with my day, blah, 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 blah. I go to the grocery store, I pay something, the woman at the counter throws the change in my face. My RAS will go ahead and tell me, oh, she probably threw the change in your face because she thinks that you're also ugly. And so this is literally just a world that we're constructing in our mind. It's the RAS that is literally building those little bubbles. It's the RAS that is literally just strengthening your belief system. All it does is it looks for many proofs, many facts, and it structures, it literally invents, it constructs something that would sustain your belief. Therefore, it is very possible that the guy who looked at me in the morning and looked at my beard for 3 seconds more than a human usually looks at me, it's possible that he looked at me because he absolutely loves my beard and he wanted to know where I go to cut my hair. And that woman that threw the change at me, well, she probably just had a freaking terrible day and her husband screamed at her or whatever. That's 99% chance what actually happened, right? But because of my belief, because I woke up that morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, oh, I really think that today I look ugly, which is something that I would have never said any other day of the week. But because of that morning, that was my belief. What my RAS did is it took everything that it was physically capable of taking in my reality and it started to construct different realities, different perceptions based off of my beliefs that I entertained that very morning. So we realize that what happens is this. We have certain belief systems. Those belief systems are now being vetted by our reticular activating system. And what does the reticular activating system does? It emphasizes the beliefs, which is why we have all these exclamation marks over here. It's because the RAS looks into our baggage of information and it says, you know what? I will prove him right. I will prove him that which he thinks of himself today, well, it is true. And therefore, it draws your attention towards more facts that will make you believe that, yes, indeed, that is the case. But when it comes to wealth, do you see how far this can take you? Do you see how far you can go if your beliefs are extremely aligned with the wealth consciousness that you're trying to reach, with your massive goals? Do you see how the RAS could help you? Do you see how the RAS can lift you up and make you believe even more that, yes, indeed, you are this man or you are this woman? Do you see how this goes? But there is an issue. It's that, yes, although it is true that the RAS always wants to show to you that, yes, your beliefs that you've got, they're true. And in fact, it's not that they're true. It's, I'm going to push more of those beliefs in your face so that you believe and you become more of a believer of your own beliefs. That's what it does. So the RAS makes sure that your belief system are becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. Why? Why does the RAS do that? And that is when we're about to get into the most interesting topic of your whole entire life. Why does the RAS do that? It is because within the RAS, there is something that is stored within it. And that is something which we called the good old ego. The ego. The ego is stored within the reticular activating system. I'm sure that a lot of you guys have heard of the fact that we have to go through an ego death. We have to kill the ego. We have to throw the ego out the window. But the problem is, there's not a lot of individuals that will genuinely tell you why and how. Why should I kill my ego? What does this have to do with anything that we spoke about? And I mean, at the end of the day, why should I throw my ego out the window? You know, for a lot of individuals, they'll think that, hey, I mean, the ego is pretty healthy. You know, no, I want to think that I'm the shit, and I want to think that I'm that guy and I'm this girl and blah, blah, blah. I want to have a high ego. A lot of individuals will align with this truth. What needs to be understood is you don't want to get completely rid of the entirety of your ego. In fact, you cannot. You want to get rid of a piece of your ego, and you will understand why. Let's first understand, why does the reticular activating system wants to prove to us that our belief systems are actually a truth? And therefore, like I said, it emphasizes those belief systems. Here's why. It's because the ego is stored within the RAS. And so what is the ego? The ego, in very simple terms, is that which wants to be right within you. It's that part within you that always wants to be right. But most importantly, the ego takes care of maintaining your survival as a human being. Please read. The ego wants to be right and it wants to maintain your survival. It wants to prove to you that your beliefs are the way to go. That is how the RAS and the ego are very, very intimately connected. It is because the ego, which is stored in the RAS, is always out there wanting you to see that, hey, your belief systems, they're the way to go. You are right. You are correct. You should go out there and see more of those belief systems and become even more of a strong believer of those belief systems that you've been able to stack up throughout the year. Now, I'm sure you're going to ask yourself, well, then why? Why is it that this is how the ego acts? Why is it that the ego wants to prove to me that those belief systems are perhaps something that I should see more of and I should keep entertaining? It's funny because you see that the RAS and the ego, they're one. They're stored within one another. And so it's very important to understand why those two are actually trying to prove to you that your belief systems are things that you should entertain even more. Why is it that our RAS draws our attention towards facts that always aligns with our beliefs? And then where are we gonna go from that? Because so far it sounds like an interesting topic, but you don't genuinely see how this is gonna change your life yet, which is when you have to stay patient for an additional 120 seconds and then you'll know. You have to understand that the ego and the RAS does that because the ego takes care of your survival. And therefore the ego, what it thinks is this. It's, hey, if today Nicholas thinks that he's ugly or that he's wealthy or that he's poor, if Nicholas has those belief systems today and he survived by having those beliefs, don't forget, the ego maintains your survival. So what the ego says, it's, hey, Nicholas has a belief system right now, which is that he's poor or he's wealthy or he's ugly or he's the most good-looking guy ever. This is a belief that he has. And because it seems like he kept himself alive having those beliefs, well, me as the ego, because I want to preserve Nicholas's survival, I will make sure that he believes more of those beliefs. And he believes that yes, indeed, he is wealthy, or yes, indeed, he is the greatest man on the face of this earth. The ego will push those beliefs. Why? Because it saw that as long as you are entertaining those beliefs, clearly you're still alive. And since it takes care of maintaining your survival, if it sees that with those belief systems you've survived, what it will do is the ego will work hand in hand with the RAS to emphasize those beliefs. So that instead of going elsewhere, instead of believing things that are now in an unknown territory, which the ego doesn't like, the ego doesn't like the unknown. The unknown puts your survival at risk. Therefore, the reason that we are always brought back to our belief system is because the ego and the RAS works hand in hand together to maintain your survival. And like I said, since your belief system up until today have kept you alive, since your ego takes care of your survival, the ego does simply 1 + 1 = 2. If he survived with those belief systems, I will give him more of those belief systems so he keeps himself alive. And so now you're understanding that there is a loop over here. There is a loop. It's as if the RAS looks into your beliefs, and now what your ego will do is it will strengthen up those beliefs. It will strengthen up those beliefs. It'll make you look into places that will indeed make you sustain those beliefs. Now I'm sure you're still wondering, how on earth is this something that is beneficial for me? How on earth is this something that is going to genuinely change and revolutionize the trajectory of my life? Well, it's because once that you understand this, and you at least understand how this could be beneficial for you, how this could be actually a hand to allow you to shift towards your wealth consciousness, once that you see how this pattern can be beneficial for you, you start to see that yes, indeed, this could be beneficial. What if my belief systems were to change and from a day to another I genuinely believed that I'm a multimillionaire? What would change? Well, here's what would change. The more that the ego sees that you survive with this new belief system of yours, the more that it sees that, hey, he said that he's a multimillionaire and he actually survived with that idea. The more that it sees that, the more that the ego will instruct the RAS to prove to you that your belief systems are true. And yes, Nicholas, you are this multimillionaire. You actually are. You are this man. You are this man. Look at all these exclamation marks over here. It's because the ego will scream at you even more and will literally fabricate a bunch of truths around you that will prove to you that yes, indeed, those belief systems, well, you have a right to keep them with you. You are right for believing that. Now, here's what the problem is. The ego, ladies and gents, and this is why we often tell people it's very important to let go of the ego. Again, 99% of the industry will just give you half-truths. They'll never really tell you why. What you need to understand over here, ladies and gents, it is true that this is something that could be extremely, extremely beneficial for you if you can use this pattern correctly and in healthy ways. But what you also need to understand over here is that the ego creates 3 things. And that is the problem. That is something that we need to disconnect ourselves from. Here's what the ego creates. It creates control. It creates resistance, and it creates a lack of faith. Now, I'm sure you're wondering why. Why is it that the ego creates control? Why is it that our ego creates resistance? Why is it that ego creates a lack of faith? The truth is, those 3 points, they really work hand in hand together. You've got to understand that because the ego wants to be right, and it wants to maintain your survival, and it wants to show you that your belief systems, well, you should maintain them because they kept you alive, and you should see more of them. And me as the ego, I shall construct more truths for you that will prove to you that yes, you are right. That creates control. It creates control. It gives that peace within you the willingness to control. Let's say, for example, that today I believe that I am wealthy. Well, the problem is this, is that my ego will want to control myself, my beliefs, and it will want to control my reality So that what? So that I only see wealth around me. But here's what the problem is. As the ego decides to control me and it decides to only make me see life a particular way, what am I doing unconsciously? You've got to ask yourself those questions. What am I doing unconsciously when I allow my ego to control my perception and the reality that it constructs for me through my RAS? What am I doing? I will tell you what I'm doing. I am fighting against life. When I decide and I desire to control, when my ego wants to control because it wants to be right and it wants to maintain my survival, and therefore it decides to control me, it decides to make sure that I only see that which I believe, what happens is this: you are continuously fighting against your current life circumstances. You will literally accept nothing else but things that will prove you right. That is the problem. It's that if, for example, you have a belief that says, hey, I'm a multimillionaire, the second that you have something in your life that suddenly doesn't really align, for example, you get an email that you didn't want or you get an email that you didn't expect, what happens then? You go to shit. You simply go to shit. Why? Your frequency drops because now the ego wants to control your environment. Your ego will literally make you look at this email and tell you, hey, what the fuck is this? You're not supposed to see this. You're not supposed to have a negative email. You're supposed to only have a wealth consciousness. You're supposed to only have this positivity within you. It doesn't allow anything else to be filtered within your own mind. The problem with this, the problem with the fact that your ego is very selective with what it allows to sink within your mind is that, as Isaac Newton said himself, he said, whatever you fight will fight you back. If the ego fights everything else but that which you believe is going to never come to you, and what will fight you is always going to be things that are not in alignment with your belief. What Isaac Newton said is, whatever you fight or whatever you resist will persist. The important thing to understand about the ego is the ego will resist anything that you do that is not within your spectrum of belief system. That is problematic because that which we will resist will persist. Therefore, if our belief system is that we are wealthy, what is the ego going to do? It's going to resist things that is being perceived as poverty. For example, like I said, if you receive an email and it is something that you weren't desiring, the ego will resist the email and it will tell you, shit, what's happening? What is this email? This email is not aligned with your belief system. What does that happen? What is that going to do? What's going to happen after that? It's going to drop your frequency. It's going to raise your fear. It's going to raise your intensity and your negativity. You're suddenly going to start to hyperventilate because now your ego is put on the line. Now your ego is starting to say, holy fuck, what's going on? What is this? It resists everything else that is outside of the box of your belief system. And therefore, as the ego starts to resist everything else that is outside of your belief system, everything else that is outside of your belief system will what? It will literally persist. Like Isaac Newton said, it'll fight back. So you're gonna notice that even though oftentimes, you may have phenomenal belief system about wealth, about this, about that, and you're gonna come to me and tell me, well, Nicholas, I don't know why life is hitting me hard when, my belief systems are extremely aligned with me. Why is that? Why do I still suffer even though I really believe that I'm this guy and I make money and all that? It's because the ego is resisting everything else that is outside of your belief system. And therefore, what you resist persists. Do you understand that even if your belief systems, your belief is nicely aligned with who you want to become, even if who you want to become is a multimillionaire and your belief system really sustains the fact that, hey, you are this multimillionaire, even though your beliefs are A+, you can still go through massive headaches and heartaches because now the ego is now put on the line. And now the ego wants to only prove that yes, you are right, and it will completely want to remove everything else. It will resist the rest of reality. And therefore, the more that the ego resists the rest of reality, the more that the rest of reality will persist and will fight you. If you have the belief that you're a multimillionaire, but your ego resists the fact that you can't have a bad day because a bad day apparently doesn't align with being a multimillionaire. You can't have something negative happen to you. You cannot lose money. You cannot have anything that takes more of your money than it's supposed to. And anything that is essentially not really aligned with being a multimillionaire, the ego will resist that because it will say, hey, all of that, fuck that, that doesn't align with this. It doesn't align with the belief system of a multimillionaire. And as it resists this, what happens? This persists. And it fights you back. That is why being and having solid belief systems is not enough. You must control the ego. That is the first thing that is very, very, very important to understand about the ego. The second thing that is important to understand is this. Is that the ego subconsciously screams a lack of faith. Why? Because the ego seeks to control. And as the ego seeks to control everything around you, to prove you that your only reality is your belief system, what happens is this. You are subconsciously becoming a human being with less and less and less faith. You become a human being that wants to control. You become a human being that has no faith. And therefore, what is it that you can achieve as a human being without faith? What are you going to achieve? It is said, I believe in the Bible, that faith is one of the most magical substance in the human body. We don't know what faith is. Faith is essentially the belief in the unseen, right? The belief in the higher realms. Well, the ego removes that faith out of you. It creates a lack of faith because a lack of faith is literally the derivative of a man being in control. Oftentimes, a man that always wants to have control. And of course, when I mean control, I don't mean that, if you're not in control, then you're being dragged around. Not at all. By control, I mean that you don't let the universe do its thing. You don't allow the natural flow of this universe. You don't. You resist. You're stiff. You're not an effortless, flowless guy that just fucking attracts. That's not who you are. You now, because you are under you are being governed by your own ego, control, resistance, and lack of faith is what you will constantly have and you will suffer from your whole entire life. Unless you ask yourself that question. How do we then remove the negative sides of our ego? Notice how I said, how do we remove the negative sides of our ego? I didn't say how do we remove the ego. I didn't say how do we kill the ego. I said, how do we remove the negative sides of the ego? Because not all about the ego is negative. A lot of it is positive. But a couple of these points, of course, as you know, it destroys you, it destroys your life, and most importantly, it is done unconsciously. So here's what I like to do in order to remove this negative side of my ego. What I like to do is this. Since the ego is what always wants to control, and since this control creates resistance, this resistance then creates that which I resist to persist and to fight me and to not allow me to flow towards that which I believe. Because of that, I will never amount to anything. Therefore, we are looking to remove the control. How do we then remove the control, you may ask? Here's how I have been doing it for decades now. I give not the control, or not only the control, but I also give all credits to God. Now let me explain. What I mean by that is, whenever I have individuals that come in my life and say, oh, well, Nicholas, how are you doing this? How are you doing all of that? How do you do this and that so effortlessly? How are you capable of doing that? They always point fingers at me. How are you able to do all this? This is crazy what you have built. I look at them and I say, it's not me. It's God. It's all God. And then they're going to look at you and say, well, no, it's certainly a bit of you. No. It's true. There's a bit of me. But without God, I wouldn't have been able to do anything at all. It's all God. I give this control. I give the credits to God. By giving all of my credits for all of the things that I've been able to create to God, what do? I give Him the control. I say out loud that God is what controls everything that I've been able to build. Therefore, the way that we remove this egocentric side of us, which pretty much destroys our reality, as you were able to see, is by giving the control to somebody else. By not saying that, hey, it's the ego that holds my control. It is now God that controls. It's God that I give my credits to. And oftentimes when I say this, there's two types of people, there's the type that's just gonna look at me and say, oh, well, you're right, it's true, it's absolutely God. And then there's the others that are gonna say, what are you talking about? Like, no, it's you, it's you. And no matter who you may be, you've got to understand that at the end of the day, it is not us. It is this infinite creative power within us, which is God, that has allowed us to do everything in the first place. Therefore, like I said, what allowed me to keep my faith, not resist, not control, is to give all of this to God. And I give all of this to God by, every single time that I get the opportunity to, of course, by giving all of my credits to God. When I give credits to God, I am now hinting to my subconscious mind that I am not particularly in control. I give all my credits to God. I am not particularly resisting anything that is going to be happening in my life because it's God that will decide what will happen in my life. And if it comes, then it's because God decided. No resistance. So number one, you are now less stiff, right? And when you are less stiff, what happens? You allow things to flow to you a little bit more effortlessly. Number one, when you have no more resistance and you say that, hey, no matter what God brings to me, I'm going to be able to take it with open arms. Whenever you're capable of saying this, you remove all sort of resistance. Therefore, you're not exposing yourself to a drop in frequency and a boost of fear when something weird happens in your life. You have no resistance. If it came, it's because of God. It's all because of God. So if it happens, give him the control. If something is happening right now, it's all good. Give him the control. Get rid of control. Get rid of resistance. And naturally, you increase faith. Because, I mean, we don't even need explanations, right? We don't need an explanation for that. You increase your faith by constantly saying that all credit goes to God. And so by doing that, what are you doing? What are you doing? When you have control in the hands of God, when you have the credits in the hands of God, you have the resistance in the hands of God, you don't even care about resistance anymore. You don't resist anything at all. When faith is now in the hands of God and you have faith and you have no problems with that, what happens? It soothes itself. And that natural process is now something that you can do day in and day out. But this, unfortunately, does not happen effortlessly if the ego is constantly on fire. This process, the fact that you see that you're a multimillionaire and your RAS works with the fact that you're a multimillionaire and proves to you even more that you're a multimillionaire and attract things to you that proves to you that yes, you're a multimillionaire and just works hand in hand with your belief. This doesn't happen if the ego doesn't calm down. Why? Because of those 3 points. So when we release ourselves from that negative side of our ego, we allow the other side of us just to flow, just to bathe within all of our beliefs and within everything that we worked so hard to believe. Now that which we worked so hard to believe will show its proofs to us, and that of course will work by natural cause and effect. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly how you're going to gain back control over your life. This is how you become this effortless human being that can flow and acquire and remain confident that he is what he tells himself to be. And most importantly, this is how you work hand in hand with the ego without battling the ego. Because as you know, fight the ego will fight you back. Instead, soothe the ego and allow the rest of reality to work its magic.